I have found a planet that's well hidden, Earth. You will travel there and establish a base for us. Once we've gathered the others, we'll join you. You must protect the planet. If the Decepticons find it, then our people are truly finished. Here's your look at the new ThreeZero. This is the Transformers Bumblebee DLX scale collectible figure of Optimus Prime. On the planet Cybertron, the Autobot resistance led by Optimus Prime is on the verge of losing the civil war against the Decepticons and prepares to evacuate. However, a Decepticon force led by Starscream, Soundwave, and Shockwave intercepts them during the evacuation, and Optimus sends Autobot Scout B-127 to Earth in an escape pod in order to set up a base of operations where the Autobots can regroup. ThreeZero are proud to announce their DLX scale collectible figure of Optimus Prime as seen in Transformers Bumblebee. The figure has exact details found in the film and features LED light-up eyes. Now, before we go ahead and get extensively into this review of Optimus Prime, let's first figure out how tall the figure stands. It would certainly be debatable depending on where you place his arms, as the smokestacks technically are the tallest point on the figure. We're going to stop the Ultra Measure-Tron 5000 right there. Give or take, this is as tall as Optimus Prime stands. So again, factor in how you're going to be placing the smokestacks. The figure stands, however, around 11.5. I've clocked it in at 11.7, but it's around 11.5 inches in height. Speaking of centimeters, slipping the tongue almost saying centimeters. Centimeters, however, the figure stands almost 30 centimeters tall. 29.8 to be exact. The figure gets himself a display stand, and a rather cool looking display stand, as it certainly looks like something you would see from the floor of Cybertron. Perhaps the battles are underway in the background here, and Prime is standing his ground atop of this really cool, like I said, display stand. On the top there, we've got ThreeZero and Transformers Bumblebee done in blue. This is a small little point to make. I would have actually liked if this was done in black or white. Blue seems sort of jarring for that font. It's almost not quite hard to read, but certainly seems jarring to see it in blue. Would have loved to have seen it in white, but again, that's such a small little point. Attached to the stand and some assembly that's required is you do get this adjustable neck and front support. Simply, it's just a case of attaching the two. When you get them out of the packaging, you just pop this out. A little hard when you go back and do it again, but you just pop this out. And essentially what it is you're just attaching this neck to the socket in the opening here, and then you just attach the back section here. The only thing is, though, when you are doing this too frequently, it does have to catch itself underneath here, clasping in place, that if you take it off too frequently, I feel as if, though it hasn't happened yet, you may start developing some stress marks in those tabs. So again, just kind of keep that in mind when you are removing this. Say if you are disassembling the figure and you're putting away for storage. I would not suggest maybe pulling this off too frequently, just in case, again, you break one of those tabs here or here. But again, just to install it, it can't be any bit simpler than just lining it up to the opening hole there. Line this up just like that and push both in place. You'll probably hear a good satisfying snap when everything stays in place. For the next stand, it adjusts in 3 places. It hinges here and slides along the track here. You can increase and decrease the heights of the stand neck, as well as you can adjust this section right here. Let me show you how this works. So if you want to bring this forward, you shift it. You're simply just pulling it forward and pulling it back. The thing about it, though, is it has a locking mechanism that when you bring back, you can hear it's locked in place. And to relieve that, you just push that up, and then you can slide it along the track, just like so, until you find the section that you want to lock it to. And again, it's going to stay in place. If you saw at the beginning of this review, I tried to mimic the pose of Prime, that iconic scene of Prime leaping in the air, firing off his plasma cannon. The thing about it, though, is the stand, the neck, is strong enough that it supports Prime in mid-air. You don't have to worry about this caving away or falling forward. It does a good job of, like I said, locking in place. The key, once again, though, is shifting this back and forth. Once it's unlocked, it quite freely moves back and forth, hinges against the corner section of the neck, and when locking in place, just bring that down. As for the top section, it sort of works the same way. The neck comes up, which you probably can hear a very loud ratcheted joint as it clicks and moves its way up. This is the furthest point that it's going to go. It doesn't go down on its own. In order to release it and drop it back into the cavity of itself, you have to take this tab piece here and push it down. Once you're pushing it down, it quite freely slides up and down. And again, when you have it in a certain place, you just lock it and it doesn't go anywhere. Very strong locks as well. Again, putting Prime in air is not a feat that's so simply done. The fact that it's being able to hold it the way it does through the support strut here and the section up here is really, again, quite clever. The fact that ThreeZero could do such a thing with the adjustable neck like this. The last thing that adjusts on this particular neck is this piece right here. Now, it doesn't so much adjust up and down. Let me just bring this down all the way so it just doesn't make noise over this review. This section here does adjust, but it doesn't adjust in the way that you can lift and lower it. In order to adjust it, you actually have to pop this out. And you can see right there, it's made up of a series of grooves. Those grooves line up with the grooves inside and again locks it in place. So when you have Prime in an angled pose or upright or even in flight pose, all of this stuff works together here, here, and here, or here, here, and here, and kind of keeps everything locked in place. It's impossible for you to move this up and down. Again, the only way to adjust it is to pull it out. I find it's actually easier if you take Optimus Prime. We'll grab the figure right now. To connect it to Prime, by the way, it's this back section right here. I've simply just left it off so I could show you guys where it goes. But when you do get the figure, it's this section right here. This cover is just right in between the two sides of his silver plates. And to get access to it, you're just going to grab your finger and very carefully pop that out. Then you can take the adjustable, again, the adjustable tap point for the top of the neck and just fit that in place. Once that's in place, it's really just a case of deciding where you want Prime. So if you want Prime in kind of the air, you can then just put in the peg, as you can see right there on the angle, and then again it keeps Prime in place. Now, let me just put this in perspective for you. I'm not obviously putting him in pose, nor am I really attempting to put him in a pose, but I just want to say that this is a pretty weighted figure. The fact that the neck holds it as well as it does, I've extended it a little bit here. And again, for the fact that you have to pop this peg back in, really securely holds the figure in place, pending, of course, your decision for exactly how you want to display this incredible looking figure. One thing to come included with the figure, and one thing I should stress that you check through first before you start moving and manipulating Optimus Prime, is the enclosed DLX scale collectible figure instruction manual. A very handy tool, I must say, spending the necessary minutes to go through it. Not only does it show you how the articulation works, things you got to be careful of, it shows you how to operate the display stand, and it also it shows you how to install the batteries. The batteries, sadly, are not included. He supports two AG13s, which I had a tough time discovering AG13s in the store until realizing that they were the standard LR44 batteries. LR44 batteries are pretty common to come by, and you could pick them up pretty much anywhere, like Walmarts and battery places. Needless to say, though, I would definitely suggest, no, I would recommend wholeheartedly, definitely going through the guide before you start handling and moving things on Prime. Things that you think you could move ultimately are things that could potentially break the figure, so be very mindful. Go through the guide first, spend the necessary time that's required before, like I said, you start kind of delving deeper into moving and manipulating the leader of the Autobots. Sadly, having to decapitate Prime, just for the time being, I wanted to show you guys the head sculpt. This is simply something I could easily pull off by keeping the head where it should belong on the shoulders of Prime's body, but it also gives me the opportunity to showcase to you guys where the battery compartment is located. What a stunning head portrait. One of the things I liked so much about the design of Prime from the Bumblebee film is they felt the need to keep the plate guard in front of his mouth. Something, again, I wasn't a big fan of when it came to Michael Bay Prime. I didn't like the fact you could see his mouth. Here we go back to basics, back to Generation 1, if you will, and you get, as a result of that, a stunning, stunning portrait. But don't worry, we're not going to have Prime headless for the rest of this review. It was simply just a case to show you guys where the battery compartment is. If you look at the back of the figure, and there's this gray tab right here, it's very easy actually to get your finger behind it. I was worried I was going to break the fins on the sides of his helmet as a result of it, but no, if you get your fingers in there and your fingernails are long enough, you can just dislodge. Basically what you're doing is removing just this piece right here. You see how that all comes together? From there, you're just going to go ahead and take the battery compartment out. Keeping in mind, when you first get this out of the packaging, the batteries will not be there, and you're going to go ahead and put them in place. Now, a little tip, though, when you are putting the batteries in place, those two LR44 batteries, you know how the batteries have like a flat section, and then on the underside it sort of has like a piece that sticks out? Does that make any sense? Well, the flattest side faces away from the light, if that helps. Stack the two in, very easy to install, and then you've got your light activation button here on the front. I'm going to do my best, obviously, not to point that right at the camera, because I certainly don't want to blind any of my viewers, but that is a very bright blue LED light. Then you can go ahead and just fit that back into Prime's head. Now, when you are putting it in Prime's head, the battery button activation here, you would want to have at the top, not on the bottom. Or if you wanted to look at it this way, the shortest point, the longest length below it, will be the part that fits inside the cavity of Prime's head. Just line that up, fit that in place. Doesn't snap necessarily in place, but you'll know if it's far enough down when you can put the head back in place, and it doesn't feel like there's something stopping and preventing you from doing that. Just line everything up, push it down, far enough down, and then to turn it on, you're actually going to press it right in the middle of his diamond crest, turning it on like that. Now, obviously, it's not as bright when it's inside the cavity of Prime's head, but you can see how brightly that projects the light. Perhaps not conveying it against my hand here, but you can definitely see in hand how bright those LED lights actually work. Again, love the fact that they would have light up options. It happens to represent also the only light up areas on the Prime's body. I don't really think I would need necessarily lights anywhere else, having had enough of the 6 scale figures where you do have to put batteries everywhere. I'm fine and content for the fact that the batteries are only relegated to Optimus Prime's eyes here. Looking at Prime's accessories, the first thing we'll have a look at is his trademark Ion Blaster. A rather familiar sight for those growing up with the original Generation 1 toys and cartoon. This would look somewhat familiar. Nitpicking slightly, perhaps, to the design of the film version of the blaster, I would have loved if the back section was just a little bit higher, like the original Generation 1 cartoon design was. But still, though, it's familiar enough that I can look at it and think it's a more modernized take of his original blaster gun. I love the fact that they've done it in a two-tone gunmetal gray. Best place to show you is this section right here. Primarily, most if not all the coloring is this dark gunmetal gray, but they've gone in and dry brushed a layer of scratched in silver just to kind of root it more in a modern environment. The blaster does fit into Prime's hand via one of the many different hands that he comes included with. We can go ahead and have a look at those right now. The figure comes packed with 9 interchangeable replacement hands. In the sockets currently are the ones defaulted from the box when you open it up, and that is a pair of closed fists. Nothing really overly exciting there. However, when you start branching out to some of the other offerings that they come included with, then you can get to some real extreme dynamic poses that you can put Optimus Prime in. I guess what we could start with is the gripping hands used for his ion blaster. He gets one for either side, so you're not necessarily relegated to just posing the ion blaster on this hand. You can ideally really display it on either side. Taking, say, this side right here, and taking this hand of the possible two. Again, looking at the two of them, they're nicely sculpted hands. They don't really have a whole lot of extra color to them, but again, they're a nice updated take to Prime's original cartoon hands. They are made of a softer plastic, at least in the sense that if you are putting it around the blaster, for example, let's take the handle here, if there's enough allowance that you can move the fingers away from itself, so you don't feel like you're having to fight it or potentially break the fingers as a result. You can clearly see that Prime's pointer finger is nestled quite nicely around the trigger of the ion blaster, and that is the same on both sides, just again a matter of which side you want to display him with his trusty firearm. He also gets a pair of dynamic hands, again an opportunity to showcase some of the fantastic sculpting that they were able to incorporate in here, even to the point where the hinge joints, the sections of the fingers that would bend, are being painted in silver. Just again, a little bit of extra detail allowanced by the folks over at ThreeZero. Again, these don't have any articulation points to speak of, but again, you've got some dynamic hands if you want to display the figure with those. Included as well is a pair of relaxed hands, if you want to just display Optimus Prime in a museum pose, or if you've got one hand with the ion blaster and you want to just do something else with the hand other than using and resulting a closed fist, then you can go with one of these hands as an option as well. Last but certainly not least, he comes with what I would consider the leadership hand. This is the hand to gesture and point directions to his fellow Autobots, leading them into battle. Other than that, I can't imagine really what else you would use this hand for. You could use it as certainly a saluting hand, but really looking at it, I consider it more of a directional pointing instruction hand than anything else. Prime is comprised of plastic and die-cast components, resulting in a rather surprising unboxing. When you first get this guy, you're really surprised with how heavy he is when you get him out of the box. One thing I really love about the design specifically of Bumblebee's Optimus Prime is that he goes back to the basics of Generation 1. Gone is the day of the Michael Bay design of Optimus Prime, which, don't get me wrong, I was fine for the design of Prime, but I much more prefer this classic look for Optimus Prime, recreated here perfectly by ThreeZero. Looking at some close-up details of the figure, we'll start once again with his head. I know we've already looked at the head when I showed you how to install the batteries, but the head sculpt is so good that it definitely does deserve a second look. Once again, you've got the diamond crest on the front of his helmet that serves as the on and off switch, providing you can get your finger in there, and you can get, once again, those very, very bright LED lights. Inspired by the original Generation 1 cartoon, clearly is where Prime's design here comes from the new Bumblebee film. I like that it still is classic Prime, but just given a modern take. So things like his mouth guard, things that he would have in the original cartoon, get an upgrade with some additional detailing that wasn't there before. I really do like the head sculpt quite a bit. The thing about the head, though, that you have to be careful of is that it's attached by a ball joint. The neck, if you can see right there, also is attached by a ball joint. So the neck itself has its own independent movement. You can move it left and right, you can move it up and down. And then the head on top of that does have its own ball joint. The thing about it, though, is you've got to be careful with the head. There's these tab points, these little pieces are sticking up here on his neck. You can probably see it right there and right there. If you move the head across that, you instantly feel like you're hitting resistance. Now, over wear and tear of moving this back and forth, I don't know if you're going to cause some damage to that. So I would say if you are moving the head, it's probably a good idea to tilt the head up, rotate it to where you want it, and then drop the head back down. If you keep it low on a low profile, you're always going to be hitting those little tab points, those little front sections I've already described in the neck. The neck has some super cool detailing to it, all done and treated in a gunmetal gray. And equally so, you've got the darker gray that's been added to his face guard. The side of his fins also are done in the blue with some additional detailing that wasn't there in the original cartoon. One of the great things of having ThreeZero producing a 6-scale recreation of Optimus Prime from the original Bumblebee film is that you get a chance physically on hand to see some of the details that you wouldn't be able to catch in the film. Optimus Prime makes such a very short appearance in the original Bumblebee film, only really in the opener, that you have a tough time really making out what's all going on. The scene itself is also so low lit that it's really hard to make out some of the details that now only being able to see them here in physical form, it's crazy the amount of detailing that not only the film was able to put into Optimus Prime, but the fact that ThreeZero was able to recreate that here as a 6-scale figure. Like, it's crazy the amount of detail that's actually packed into this figure itself. Still familiar are the colors of the grays and primarily the reds. Even things like his smokestacks, though I'd be very curious to see how a Bumblebee version of Optimus Prime, at least on Cybertron, what alternate mode he would have transformed into. But it's crazy the fact that we see things like smokestacks, really something that you would expect to see from his Earth mode. Familiar are the panels, the stripes of white that run across his shoulders, and rather even familiar to that is the fact that he's also got his emblem, the Autobot logos, on either sides of his shoulders here. One thing I think helps ground this 6-scale figure in the real world is ThreeZero's attention to naturally settling detail. Let me just show you what I mean by that. Even things small, something that you may not even notice, like the smokestacks. In robot mode, you can't imagine that these would be expelling smoke in any way, but certainly in vehicle mode, whatever vehicle he may be in on Cybertron, something is going to be expelling out here, an outpour of exhaust, resulting in burnt oil, burnt energon, maybe settling on the tops of the smokestacks, and they felt the need to airbrush darker areas around that. Now that carries across all of this figure. I just happen to use the smokestacks as the example. The stripes, for example, are tarnished by the fact that they've airbrushed some additional brown on there. That could be dirt, that could be debris, that could be the ashes of his fallen Autobot comrades. Either way, though, they have naturally aged this body, so it doesn't look pristine and clean, as you would expect the leader of the Autobots. He certainly have been through enough battles. You would imagine resulting in that you would have naturally settling things like debris and ashes on the actual body. There's discolorations even on the back section right here, where you can see it almost even seems like the settling or developing of rust on either sides, like natural rusting, natural aging, natural dirt and debris settled in places where you would imagine them to be settling. And ThreeZero has really done a great job of recreating that on a smaller version of Optimus Prime. Now, this actually goes more back to the original Generation 1 cartoon, but a nice little touch that I like that they added for the Bumblebee film is that Optimus Prime has these inverted triangles, these yellow triangles, very familiar sights watching the original cartoons, and even the animated film, Optimus Prime had that. It's really, really cool that they would put that in the film and recreate it here in the 6-scale version of him as well. Like, there's a lot of cool stuff happening here. You can see wheels and chains of things that would be moving in conjunction with one another, all allowing Optimus Prime to move something like his arm. Things of, again, if you had a 4K version of the movie and freezing it in frame, you would not even be able to pick up half the stuff that you're able to see here on this 6-scale version of him. Familiar Generation 1 color schemes continue their way down Optimus Prime's lower torso. Silver done here in the legs with some naturally forming rust, sort of looking as if it's starting to settle on the surface of his metal. The blue in the legs, again, something you would expect to see with the original Prime design. I even like the fact that they did an updated, modernized version of the vents that he would have had on the fronts of his legs. If you spin the figure around, he has these tires which appear to be real rubber. I like it that they've even added to the tread naturally dirt and scuff that's settled in the grooves there. Even on the backs of Prime's legs, you can even see that ThreeZero spared no detail by adding these back pistons. The pistons actually don't serve any purpose. It doesn't change and move as you're moving the legs up and down. But again, I just love the fact that they would add something as small as that. Looking at Optimus Prime's articulation, as you probably have guessed it already, this Optimus Prime does not transform. I don't feel like I'm losing anything by having a Prime that doesn't transform, because really at the end of the day, you're going to be displaying this Prime in robot mode anyways. Say what you want, even if you had a transforming Optimus Prime, 9 times out of 10, you're probably just going to keep him in robot mode anyways. And I really certainly would not want to sacrifice as good of a sculpt as we've gotten here for the sake of having moving components that would eventually turn into a vehicle. So again, I'm okay for the fact that this Optimus Prime does not transform. Anyways, let's have a look at Optimus Prime's articulation. We've already kind of discussed his head, I feel, extensively, but we'll talk about that one more time, as he does have a ball joint, moves the head up and down, angles back and forth, and technically, as we've already discussed as well, the head can rotate all the way around, but you're always going to have that issue where it's rubbing against these front sections. The neck also has some additional articulation where you can move that up and down, you can move it left and right. So essentially, he's got a ball joint right at the base of the neck, and then he's got a ball joint attached into the socket section of his head. For the figure's arms, they rotate all the way around. And they are also on a ball joint, so you can move those arms out. Independently to that as well, the smokestack sections here also hinge outward, allowing the arms a greater reach outward. I like the fact that they did add that so that it doesn't restrict moving the arms out if you wanted to. The arms have a straight standard swivel in the bicep. It also does have a bend in the elbow. Let me just show you how that works. It's not so much one bend or two bends, it's a continuous bend. Though it looks a little awkward here and it looks like a piece of his arm is missing, I like the fact at least you do have that much of a range of bend. Let me just show you how it starts. It starts there, then you can bend it here and just continue along your way until Prime almost is able to touch his shoulders. Not quite, but almost there. The hands do rotate. Now, here's one problem with the hands. The hands are on a ball joint, but there's a whole lot of stuff that's in the way. So if you are moving the hand, you just want to be careful that if you are hitting anything, or if you feel like there's resistance, maybe just hinge the hand either out or in until you feel like you can clear whatever it is that's in the way of it. Like I said, with rotating the hand as you are, right? See right there, for example, you're hitting this section. So you might want to just bring the hand back and then be able to still continue to rotate the fist all the way around. In addition to the shoulder articulation that we already had a look at, ThreeZero also managed to put a shoulder crunch for Optimus Prime. This gives you an allotment of an extra inch or so where you can move the arms a little bit more forward than what you would be able to before. This is really an ideal time for if you want to get the Ion Blaster, for example. You can get a farther reach forward by being able to utilize that shoulder crunch. And I'm really glad that they were able to do that. For the upper torso, the torso is on a ball joint and it swivels back and forth. The big thing you really want to be careful of this section right here, which we'll talk about in a second. In addition to the top torso swivel back and forth, it also allows you, if you take the whole top section, basically from here, and grab it along the back, you can also tilt Optimus Prime's torso quite considerably also as well. You tilt it once, and then you can also tilt it a second time, giving you a ball joint here and a ball joint right there. You may not likely be displaying your Optimus Prime like that, but couple that with some of the other articulation points that we're going to be having a look at. Again, that really gives you some possibilities for how you want to display the figure. When you bring it back, though, you just want to be careful. Again, the biggest issue is really like these skirt pieces. I don't even really want to call it a skirt piece, but it's all these individual flaps that move on independent ball joints. This can be really problematic when it comes to moving things like his legs. His legs are quite posable, but the thing you really want to be careful of, and I've clipped a couple of these off in the process, is when you're moving the legs, these flaps on the sides are on hinges. These sections right here are on ball joints. You can bring those forward. And on the back sections, you can also bring these up as well. Now, if you're not mindful for any one of those and you start moving the legs, you might inadvertently start popping these off. Don't worry, most if not all the cases of these, they're just attached by ball joints. So it's simply just a case of putting and pegging those back into place. But you want to make sure that you get enough clearance for Prime's leg, as again, you can move and adjust these. The really neat thing about Prime's legs is, if you can see it right there, these shift forward and back, giving you some additional clearance. Really, in theory, you could have Optimus Prime sitting if you wanted to. The clearance of leg is that good. But again, you just want to be careful of these pieces that you don't clip and bang them. If they're in their defaulted position, you're going to knock them off every single time you start moving his leg. So in addition to having these shifting forward and back, Optimus Prime also has ball joints on the legs themselves. So you can clear the legs out almost a full splits. Almost a full splits. As you can see, there is how everything kind of connects together. It works on basically a swinging hinge right here, and then you've got attached to the thighs themselves, you've got ball joints on either sides. Moving further down the legs, you can bring the legs forward like we've already discussed. You can also bend the knees in a single hinge as well as a double hinge. It starts sectioning off, partitioning each sections of the legs so that you can kind of see some of the very intricate ways that all the pulley systems and everything would work together to make Optimus Prime be able to bend his legs like this. You can almost pull off the infamous Prime leaping in the air, firing off his ion blaster. The only thing preventing you from doing that is the neck adjustment for the display stand we already had a look at. Because it doesn't pivot, you can't actually get Prime on an angle. That's the only thing that's the drawback. You can still get him in that classic pose, but because the neck doesn't swivel, you can't rotate it on an angle, if that makes any sense. Then when we get to the lower half of his legs, when you are moving the legs back, by the way, just want to be careful of these little side pieces. These are done in plastic, this section here, and I'm guessing this is the fuel tank on the sides of his leg. When you are moving this back, you just want to make sure that nothing gets caught, nothing gets clipped, and nothing gets broken along the way. And we'll have a look at the rest of his feet. Now, moving forward further down on his feet, he does have articulation on the foot. The foot hinges forward like this, and it moves also back. It doesn't move too far back though, so if you want to have a more dynamic pose, the feet pretty much have a stopping point right here. You're not going to bring them back any further than that. You can swivel the feet back and forth, and Optimus Prime also does have toe articulation, just in case you wanted that as well. One last look at the undersides of Optimus Prime's feet. Just a kind of a finishing touch to an already stellar looking figure. They've finished even the bottom sides of his feet. This is not be something that you would normally see on Optimus Prime in the film, so again, you can get the opportunity to see it here on the 6-scale version of him. The top corner, right by his bending toe, is the logo here for ThreeZero, done in the skull, done in the white. Again, a really nice looking Optimus Prime. There's very little I would actually complain about on this particular release of him. There's a lot of cool elements to him. I guess the biggest thing I would have to be mentioning as not a deal breaker, because certainly this is far from being a deal breaker, but the one thing you want to be careful of when you do get this guy out of the packaging is start manipulating his legs. When you are manipulating his legs, there you go, just be careful of these. I know I already said that a couple of times, probably ad nausea, but believe you me, take my advice. Even the instructions indicate too, you want to just be careful of these when you start moving the legs. The last thing you'd want to do is knock these off, and even worse to that, the last thing you'd want to do is break those off. Now, I can't speak for every Transformers fan out there, but I can tell you from personal experience of growing up with the original Generation 1 cartoon, both it and G.I. Joe were beloved classics in my household, that when I first heard news that we were going to be getting a live-action version of Transformers, am I the only one that started doodling on paper what I would envision an updated look of Starscream, of Optimus Prime, of Megatron, and Soundwave? I can't be the only one. I will say, though, when I did finally see images of Bayverse Transformers, coined later, of course, by fans, it really wasn't what I envisioned Transformers to be. Sort of more the techno-organic and less the blocky Transformers that I grew up and loved. It was definitely a different world, a different time for Transformers, and a different design that went along with that. Fast forward several films later, some successful, some not so much, we eventually landed on Transformers Bumblebee. Sort of a chance and opportunity for the studio to kind of rectify mistakes they felt they made and sort of started afresh, started new, and with what many thought was considered really just a prequel, ultimately ended up being a complete remake and a reboot to the series. What we eventually got in this film, an opener, if you will, of things to come. We got exactly the kinds of Transformers that, well, again, I'm speaking for myself here, the exact kind of designs that I would have hoped for right from day one. To see Optimus Prime looking like this, a Generation 1 Optimus Prime on screen, was incredible. The idea of seeing Soundwave opening up his chest. Soundwave was opening up his chest and releasing Ravage. Or even the early sights of Blitzwing, which we had thought for the longest time was Starscream. This is really what our childhood was in front of us on the big screen. Now that's me talking about the Bumblebee film and my feelings about the Bayverse Transformers. Speaking though of the DLX scale collectible figure of Optimus Prime, this is again exactly what I would have wanted from Optimus Prime right from day one, and I can't believe the amount of detail and care that ThreeZero have put into this piece. The figure is good all around. There's a few little hiccups when it comes to around the belt section. I'm just going to call it the belt section of Prime, where you really want to be careful of moving those panels first before you start manipulating his legs. Other than that, though, it's an exquisite looking sight, and I would love to see ThreeZero take this same approach with giving us other characters from the new Transformers world. Imagining seeing what they've done here with Optimus Prime, could you imagine what they would have done with a Bumblebee? Again, a Blitzwing and a Soundwave. If this is just the start of what they plan to move forward with, I'm very excited to see some of the offerings that ThreeZero will be releasing later on in the near future for us Transformers fans. This Prime is so good, in fact, looking at him, I would love to see a convention-exclusive black Optimus Prime dying as if he did on the table. That sort of grayish-colored Optimus Prime would be fantastic. Or even a Nemesis Prime. Now that they've really got this mold nailed down, I would love to see them do different colored variants of Optimus Prime. Maybe as Nemesis Prime, maybe again the dying Prime from the original 80s animated film. The sky's the limit, and I'm really, really thrilled with what potentially could be in our near future from the folks over at ThreeZero. Again, a big thank you to the folks over at ThreeZero in the first place for even making this review possible. They were nice enough to send this my way. What do you guys think down below of the Transformers Bumblebee DLX scale Optimus Prime? You a big fan of it? I know I am. And man, oh man, it's great to see a Generation 1 Optimus Prime again on the big screen. Above and beyond, let me know down below what you guys think of the figure. If you are new to this channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. Swing next door as well and turn on that bell notification. And stay tuned, because there's going to be a lot of future ThreeZero reviews coming soon to this channel. And also, if you guys want to go back and have a look at some of my other ThreeZero reviews, don't worry, there's a playlist there that you guys can check out and watch at your viewing pleasure. Lots more videos are going to be coming your way, guys, so as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.